Hello, and welcome to the Bellringer, Volume 36. We're going to be discussing compliance versus innovation, the tug of war shaping the future of money, with Jamie Uppenberg. Jamie refers to herself as an all-purpose fintech CCO. She was with Discover Financial as the global head of digital payment strategy, followed by participating in and actively managing Fortune 500 level product pipelines, suites, and teams, as well as building full compliance management systems for several fintech startups from the ground up, crossing critical due diligence hurdles and utilizing her 19 years of experience as a compliance and risk consultant. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So this is a very topical discussion right now because regulations has been on the mind of everybody. So let's start out by talking a little bit about how regulatory compliance requirements affect the pace of innovation in the financial industry.
Yeah, I think the biggest way to talk about the impact of compliance to innovation, there's two sides to it. One
Mhm.
is the fintech startups and the founders themselves, and
Mhm.
the other are the banks and regulators who are really they end up being responsible for regulating those entities. So the tug of war comes when you have the founders who don't know the regulation and don't want to be regulated a lot of the time. They're
Mhm.
trying to, come up with brand new ways of working, and they're like, we don't want to be a party to restrictions.
Right. And
And
that's the
then
impetus of a lot of this innovation type when you're talking
it,
about
it can be,
individual.
but
Yeah.
I'll actually bring in another factor in just a moment, which is we
Uh-huh.
have these two sides, and we have that's what a lot of people think is that it's the fintech founders who are causing trouble.
Right.
The other side is that you have regulators and banks, and really the banks are the ones who end up primarily being responsible for regulating the fintechs. They are the you would call the responsible regulated entity, and so we end up with this tug of war. But the part that I'm going to bring in that might be a little different than what people think is that we don't have a proper model for regulating these entities. The regulators haven't provided a model. The banks have never managed a startup fintech before.
Mhm.
And so they're trying to regulate the startup as though it was a bank, as though they were handling money like the bank. And those models don't tend to work.
Mhm.
And they have serious gaps. And so I really think the tug of war between compliance and innovation is the failure to be able to effectively manage a fintech startup as what it is and what it needs. And then we have major fintechs that fail. And we've just gone through the Synapse situation
Right.
with some banks, and those failures then cause the whole regulator and banking oversight to constrict even further.
Okay.
And so the founders end up feeling really constrained and they don't really know what they need to do. And
Mhm.
then the banks are like, I don't want to take on this risk. I don't want to bank these entities.
Right. Well, along those lines, like you mentioned Synapse, what other ones have been negatively affected by this lack of regulation?
I mean, crypto is going to be the biggest downfall. Crypto has been
Mhm.
extremely challenging for everyone to determine how should it be regulated. FTX kicked things off. We've had, I don't want to name a laundry list, but there's quite a few. And the way I would frame it is it actually on the banking side as well. So I mean, FTX and Synapse are two major failures, and they have been with the same bank.
Right.
So it's a huge challenge. There are the way I would look at it is from the banking side, which is if you look at the banks that are banking fintechs today, they are
Right.
absolutely not the same banks that were banking fintechs 10, 15 years ago. That's because we just run through the banks. We have the banks come in and they're like, we're gonna make money, we're gonna bank some fintechs. This is great, great opportunity. They don't know how to regulate them. They run for a couple of years. They hit a major snag. Um, uh, Thread Bank just got consent. There's we're going through the next round of consent orders on the banks. And then they'll go, like the ones that we're in as of just a few years ago, exit out because the risk is too high. And some
Mhm.
of them it will bring down, SVB, Silicon Valley Bank.
Right.
And then we'll get a new round that are like, oh, these fintechs, they're looking for opportunities. Maybe we could step into this. And this has been going on for 20 years.
Well,
And the
and
regulators just haven't caught on.
right. But when we're talking about, let's say, some of the more traditional banks, what about their view on this? And are there any of those banks that you see are moving towards this?
It's a little different. In the very traditional and large banks, they tend to take the position that they don't need to take the early risk. So
Okay.
they're not going to take fintechs that haven't proven themselves, aren't,
Hmm.
they don't bring in that much money to a large bank. And they also just don't tend to have quality systems of oversight, and they know that. And so, or at least their systems know that. And so you can't get in a lot of the times. If
Hmm.
you do get in, and this I will tell my fintechs, if you do get into a large bank,
Hmm.
once you really start moving money, their systems will ping and be like, wait a minute, this is a lot of money. And then you'll end up in a risk review, and you very well may end up frozen for a period of time, or they won't bank you anymore. So be careful with really large institutions. Things can seem really good, and then
Hmm.
they can suddenly turn bad when you're really cranking up and it's going well. What those banks like to take are, go bank with somebody small. When you get big, then we can really easily see what's going on. And clearly you've run for a while, you've been regulated well, we'll take you, right?
So the low hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, there is a bank out there that right now was bought by fintech leaders of a very successful fintech startup. And they bought a state bank, and I think they're doing a great job. And they're the best I've seen. And the reason is it's lead bank. They're the best I've seen so far to date.
Hmm.
And the reason is those individuals who bought that bank, they really know what it takes to run a fintech startup. And so they
Hmm.
know how to do the compliance. Like they know how to set it up and monitor and make sure there just aren't gaps.
Hmm. And don't you think that some of the best advice you can give to your fintech startups is know what you need to do and make sure it's all in place?
Uh, it it would be if they knew. They a lot
Okay.
of times have never been in banking and they're very challenged. So I think the answer is hire well. And I actually
Hmm.
just put out an article about hiring. It's very hard to hire a fintech chief compliance officer or head of compliance
Hmm.
because it's
Why
very
is that?
difficult.
Yeah, why is that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to find someone who has a successful track record. They've done it before and they know the challenges you're going to have. What often happens is that you'll hire someone from a big bank and probably a higher title. Like they've probably
Hmm.
left a big bank and they're looking for, new opportunities. So you hire someone who's from a big bank and a higher title. And when they come into the fintech, they're used to built systems, lots of third-party providers systems.
Hmm.
They are not used to coming in, having absolutely nothing and a Google Suite and being told to make this product comply. And so they end up very frozen, and they end up asking for a lot of money and systems and things that the startup doesn't usually have in early years. So the advice is actually, I mean, this is part of what I do is find someone who can give you a foundation that is solid, that can get you started with something that they know is proven.
Hmm.
And then like we've used this before and we know it's effective.
Right.
Um, and you want to find someone who has that. And it just takes a little bit of looking.
Sure. Sure. So what, you know, I hear a lot about the US versus overseas. And right now, the US doesn't have a regulatory or compliance framework, really. They don't have the regulations. Is this the end of innovation in the US? And if, where is it more advanced? And, you know, What do you say to a company in the US now?
I think the US is has been poised very well for
Okay.
innovation, even with the challenges we have had.
Okay.
So we did change our mindset, which is a huge first step. Like we
Hmm.
have California regulators, they really shifted the ground and said, we don't want to just put up hurdles and say no. We want to find a way to say yes. And they did this years ago, and it did lay the groundwork for other states and the federal banking system to to determine like we do need to find ways. This
Right.
is benefiting consumers. So we need to find ways to make this happen. So the mindset is huge. In other countries, I don't really know. I mean, we could argue that there are countries that may be better because they just may be able to manage the fintechs better.
Right.
Um, but we are the hub of the world for fintech innovation. Like we are thinking outside the box. It's just how well we're able to implement it and get it out there and really protect consumers.
Right.
So I think we are the United States. We are the Wild West. A lot of times, I think it just comes down to even founders. And I, to your previous point of what advice to give founders, compliance isn't there to stop you. Compliance isn't just there to put in rules for no reason. And
Right.
fighting them that way is really challenging. I actually had a fintech last week. I was just being introduced to them for the first time through my partners, and they said, "Well, this is one of those where the founders really don't want any compliance. They're very resistant." I was like, "Does this still happen?" It does.
Does.
But
Yeah.
it really does. But that behavior will hurt the business. I mean, when you really start growing, that's really going to hinder you.
Hmm.
So the my perspective and the advice is remember that your goal is to protect your customers. That is the goal of the regulators. They're trying to protect your buyers most of the
Right.
time, almost all the time. So in the United States, all we need to do is shift and find the model that effectively manages the fintechs. And I believe it takes more people like my firm and my partners. It takes people who have managed fintechs successfully. It takes people like the bank I mentioned earlier, the people who bought that bank, they've successfully managed fintechs. We need to stop doing it from the banking side down,
Hmm.
or even from the bottom up. It's the middle. Like we've successfully done this. Let's look at the models that worked and go from there.
But the banks answer to regulators, correct?
Correct.
So this is what I hear a lot is that the regulators don't really understand some of the advancements that are going on and creating an environment that hinders innovation. And unless there's a change amongst that, then you're not going to see this development. I'm not playing devil's advocate. I mean, I held an event in DC and we had somebody from the SEC there sitting there
Mhm.
trying to learn things and
That's true. Yeah.
don't understand it all. So how can they, you know, create a regulatory environment or compliance environment that allows advancements while other countries like you're talking about in Asia or in Europe, um, they're much more friendly and supportive. And to add on, since we're going to be perhaps having a different government in 2025, will that impact a certain development? Sorry, I gave
I'll
you a
answer
lot there.
I'll answer 2025 separately. This is
Okay.
um I I understand the perspective that other countries are more friendly. I think that is an outsider's view. The United States is extremely friendly, and you do it just you there are we protect our consumers. So on the other side of things, the question is how much innovation are they having and how much protection do they have on
Mhm.
it as well? You want both sides. Um, to your question of the regulators, I think you're completely correct that the regulators are really challenged and can be putting in they can be putting in law and regulation that hinders innovation. But at the same time, to be honest, they put in regulation that hinders the banks themselves. They hinder processes all the time. I
Mhm.
mean, we have we have so much coming out that is just going to make the processes that we're going through, just contracting is going to be extremely difficult.
Uh-huh.
The Chevron case and like the contract terms that have to go in. Um there's a lot that comes out that we look at and go, what were they thinking? Like
Mhm.
so with that, um, they don't just impact the little starter guys, they or people, they impact the whole environment with that challenge.
Mhm.
Um, I do think, however, that as those challenges come in, we do tend to discuss and work and manage and challenge, and we tend to find ways out of it as well. Um, One of the things that a lot of people think that federal law in the United States really can hinder innovation and it can be such a challenge.
Right.
Well, it also can standardize a lot of what you do so that you aren't dealing with 50 states and four territories. And that 50 states and four territories, when you're handling laws, it can drown you.
Mhm.
So there's there's positives and negatives to both sides. The regulators, what they really need to do is begin to talk to people who work in the industry, like with the fintech startups, and see what's happening from the inside. They're not doing that a lot of the times. They're looking at it from their tower
Mhm.
and they don't really see it clearly. They also, most of them they've never worked in a fintech. I mean, I think it's almost
Yeah,
all.
yeah, exactly.
They've never worked in a fintech startup, and they don't understand how easy it can be to have them comply. Like, it's not as hard as everyone's making it out to be. We just
Mhm.
don't talk about the changes that could be made to make this easier. They're not a big bank, so, like, it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it sometimes. To your second question of
Uh-huh.
2025,
Uh-huh.
um, this this can help and it can hurt. So what you could end up with is less regulation, right? That's what everyone assumes.
Mhm.
We're gonna have maybe some whole regulatory bodies disappear. That's what people talk about. Um, you have to remember what those regulatory bodies are there for. And you could end up out of the out of the boiling pot and into the frying pan. I forget the whole term, but um
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
and that's what it is. Out of the frying
Uh-huh.
pan into the fire. Thank you. You can end up in that scenario here.
Uh-huh.
So it seems lovely to have regulation go away and we won't have as much oversight. Federal banking regulations aren't going away.
No.
You're not getting rid of AML. You're not getting rid of, you know, terrorist financing restrictions. So a lot of what we do is just going to be the same. Who is doing the oversight and how heavy the oversight is
Mhm.
becomes the question. If we remove the heavy oversight, we're going to have people, Wild West, United States, trying to get away with as much as possible. This is also a difference of the United States. We tend to try to get away with as much as possible. And what happens is we damage consumers. And when you get people who are willing to damage consumers deliberately, so blind eye, you end up in litigation. And so I understand that everyone likes less compliance. I don't, the reason I have my job is I don't have a lot of resistance to it because I find it super easy to work with.
Mhm.
And that's who you want to find somebody like that to manage your group. Cause I'm like, they can give us, we're just going to work with it. It's not really that hard. Stop resisting. Like, this is easy. Um, when we fight, we end up making errors. We end up not having what we need. And then if it gets really bad, we'll damage people. Those
And
people will
trust
sue.
and trust
Yeah.
in the whole system.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. And to everyone out there, Jamie will be on our panel next week in Chicago on digital payments, navigating the future of money. And I encourage all of you to try and come. As you know, our After the Bell events are not recorded or streamed, so you need to be there. And we're up for a very frank discussion, just as we had one today. Jamie, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.